Good evening. Can everyone hear me? I am Mike Ehrman. I'm president of the Historical Society. Welcome for this nice large crowd. I'm happy to have you here. I have some housekeeping to do. It'll take 5 or 10 minutes and then we'll get started with our speaker. The Squirrel Hill Historical Society, which many of you know, is a membership organization. We're glad to have people join. We have the largest membership we've ever had, or close to it, but we're always glad to have members. And there are membership forms in the back, and it's nominal $15 for an individual, $25 for a couple. We have a number of the leaders of our organization here tonight. We have 2 vice presidents, Helen Wilson in the back, and Betty Conley sitting over here. They each played important roles. Audrey Glickman at the camera, member of the board. Wayne Bossinger is here, and Wayne you'll hear from later this year. He'll be giving a talk. And Gene Binstock in the back, manning the book sales, which is one of the things I want to tell you about. We have our books available. Members get reduced rates. We've done 2 books the last 5 years, and we have copies of both of them in the back. We also put on your chair 2 things. Our major product, which is open to the public always, as you know, are talks, like this one tonight. Next month, I'm doing something a little different. We got the archivist, the interim archivist from Penn State University coming down to talk about the history of Penn State. We have enough alums in this area that I thought they'd be interested. We've always done real well with our college talks. They're always fascinating. So now we're going to do Penn State. And Zelda Curtis, who's in the audience, one of our members, is working with the Penn State alum to beef up attendance for that. So that is in May. In June, a representative of Pittsburgh History and Landmarks is coming. We usually invite them every 3 or 4 years. They have a film about the history of History and Landmarks, which is the citywide history group. They're coming for that. We have the Freemasons coming in July. Interesting, different kind of talk. We normally don't meet in August, but this year is I think it's 35th anniversary of our Squirrel Hill Urban Coalition. And we're going to have a celebration and a little talk and a reception here on a Thursday night in August. So please continue joining us for that. Before that, we have 2 walking tours. We have one in mid-May at Carnegie Mellon, and another one, which I'm leading, at the Business District in June. The Business District tour is new. Carnegie Mellon we did last year. Let me tell you, it was one of the most fabulous tours we've ever had. Those of you who have not done it and aren't doing it this year, you're missing a treat. And that's coming up soon. There are spots still available. So that's the what we have available to you: our meetings, our books, our walking tours. We try to respond, and hopefully better over time, to requests for information on Squirrel Hill history. We're getting better and better. And I have a question tonight. Do any of you know about any orphanage that existed in Squirrel Hill in your lifetime? Has anyone heard of anything like that? We had an inquiry on our email site. If you think of anything, talk to Helen or me about it, but I don't see any looks of knowledge. Before I bring George on, I'd like to share with you 2 personal history stories that I've been very excited about. Michael Alexander, who's here, who's also a member of our group, wrote me this winter. And after I gave a talk in December about my family's wanderings out of Europe. And Michael writes me and he says, I bet our parents went to the same school in Berlin. And so we got together, and indeed they did go to the same school in Berlin and have to have been at the school at part of the same time. We also found, we do not know if they met, but we've also found about 8 other touch points in their lives once they left in Germany and once they came here, where they could have met. And of course they're all gone, but you know, it's very exciting to find out about that. Did you have a...
Could they meet?
Pardon me?
Could they meet?
We think they may well have met, but you know, they're both passed on, and we just don't know. We don't know, but it's fascinating to speculate on. That happened to me last week, or 2 weeks ago. Now let me ask you my last question before George comes on. Did any of you know a oral surgeon named Howard or Harold Zubro here in town? Is that a name that was familiar to you?
Yes.
Okay, so today I'm in Starbucks, and I see this little card, and the card has a Zubro who's a manager, regional manager of the Starbucks stores in this area. Zubro is an unusual name. I called her and I said, does your family have any connection with Boulder, Colorado? Which is where I grew up. Turns out that this woman is the daughter-in-law of Harold. Is it Harold or Howard? I'm not sure. He wasn't here. We came later.
Harold, I believe.
Harold. It's the daughter-in-law of Harold's son. Harold's son was the nephew of my father's best friends in Boulder. and a professor that and his son, that I used to spend most of my summer days playing tennis with. So you never know what connections you find, and hopefully, frankly, over time, as we continue to have these meetings, and we're working hard to upgrade our website to allow more of this, hopefully we can keep finding stories like that, you know, where we can share together. By the way, the last product that I want to talk about, I hope you will take a look at Squirrel Hill History.org. We've upgraded our website a lot, and there's a lot of new stuff on there, and I hope all of you would take a look, because I think you find it interesting. At this point, unless there are questions, I would like to introduce George Gula, who is also a member of our group. He was born and raised in Scranton and Philly. It was in early Philly he started to get involved in trolleys in the early 1950s. Graduated from Penn State in business logistics, and then went to Scranton to work with the County of Lackawanna Transit System. He came to the Port Authority of Allegheny County in 1975, where he worked in scheduling and operations till 2009. Then he also worked alongside with the very interesting Pennsylvania Trolley Museum, which I assume you'll mention something about. And some of us have been there down in Washington. And he works on the museum archives, continues to do research on streetcar systems. George, the other day, on Saturday, my grandson was in from New York and New Jersey, and he has an active interest in trains and such stuff. And we came by a bus, and he said, "What's the Port Authority doing in Pittsburgh?"
I know the answer to that if you want it.
George,
We'll get into that.
Thank you. Your turn.
Believe me, I have had that question asked to me many times, and maybe somewhere here in the show we can talk very quickly about just why the Port Authority is running buses and trolleys. I certainly, when I came to Pittsburgh, was very interested in the trolleys, and working for the transit company, I got a chance to run cars illegally at night, but I also run them legally at the Trolley Museum, so if you come on down, you just might see me running one of the cars. I was asked to do a show on trolleys of the East End. That's a really big pot to deal with, but as I started to get into this, we found more and more simply about Squirrel Hill, and of course there's a ton of people and organizations that help to do this. with me, and one I know is here. Tom Castrodale is here. He has a few of his things. There's a few museum members here, and I want to welcome them too. Thank you for having me. We're going to start with some history. We got to get the boring stuff out of the way before we see pictures. But I don't think a lot of people realize our horse cars came in 1859, the second horse car line in the state of Pennsylvania. And of course, Philadelphia is the first. We have 17 inclines that carry passengers and automobiles. There are many coal inclines as well. 3 cable car lines, so a la Rice-A-Roni. And one of them, which is Pittsburgh Traction, owned by the Widener Elkins Syndicate, is going to come out on 5th Avenue all the way to Shady and head on Shady to East Liberty. And of course, I think that is the northern boundary of Squirrel Hill, at least many people. And here at the Port Authority, we thought that was the dividing line. Yeah, we got to have maps. 1863, right? This is called the Highlands up here in Squirrel Hill. And it's pretty rural, a lot of farms, some large landholders. Mary Shenley's out here. And out in that area, you got to realize city's starting to grow. Horse cars are starting to show up. People need a better place to live, and there's some landowners that would love to sell you some land, divided up into lots, and they come up with the idea of the Squirrel Hill Railroad. It's a steam railroad. It's issued under a special charter from the state. It's a 3.5-mile line, and all of the streetcar lines you're going to see are also leased for roughly 999 years, if you could look forward to that far. It's going to start at 5th and Bouquet, and it's going to run down to Junction Hollow over 4 Mile Run, up the hill, and I have a few more maps to get you there. Let me get a pointer if I don't get any of you the wrong way, but it's going to come up. This will be CMU property. John Keir Street is in here. Right here would be the powerhouse of the Carnegie Mellon University. It's going to go up Frolic Street, which would later become Woodlawn, which I believe now is Margaret Morrison. Cross Forbes, run on its own right-of-way to what Helen told me is now Northumberland, but it was Homewood Avenue. Homewood Avenue went off through the cemetery and up into Homewood. Sometimes I think I need three hands. Just push it, okay? Thank you. Push it down, I think.
I'm pushing it down.
Oh, why is it not doing it?
It really likes this map.
It does? Well, wait a minute. Why is it doing this? It was working fine for months.
It was.
It really was. Okay.
Here's it goes.
Do you need that?
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay.
None of this is in Pittsburgh. Up top is where I was born, Scranton, Pennsylvania, in 1886. It has the first successful streetcar line in the nation. Look at that wire running out from the back of the car. There's 2 wires up above the car, a little 4-wheel wagon type device that runs on it. When it stays on the wire, you get power. More successful happened about 2 years later down in Richmond, Virginia, when Frank Sprague, who's considered the father of the electric railroad industry, shows up with a spring and a pole and a wheel on it, which is grooved. You wonder, I think maybe the battery went.
Oh.
No.
Do you want them to be?
Now, what you're doing is moving this. Excuse me. What you're doing is moving this, and you don't want to move that. Okay.
What do you need the power brick?
We could put it in just in case.
Why
It
don't
should
you
be
just-
okay. You know. We'll just move it by hand if fast. You know, it always happens this way. It works for weeks, months. Here's another shot of the Squirrel Hill Railroad, and it is right here. You can see it running through the lines here. It's going to come over to Forbes and Bouquet. It is supposed to go to Beacon and then off into this area. Remember, it's a steam railroad. They take a look at it. Now, street railways are showing up. We've had horse cars, we've had successful cable cars, and now we've had successful streetcars. And they get the city of Pittsburgh to change ordinances to allow them to use either cable or electric power. Okay, now we got it. The digital can be voodoo. Who remembers 35mm slides? That's when the bulb would burn out.
Right.
You know, that always happened too. Anyway, so we're back to Scranton and we're back to Richmond. And we are still having trouble with this. Okay. Yeah,
There we go.
I can do this
and
now.
that'll work. And we saw this map, so why don't we go a little bit more, and we're gonna have to change, this is a little bit too wide. So,
I don't.
That looks fine.
That's fine.
It's fine. Yeah, leave it.
we okay?
Yeah, leave it.
All right, that's
Don't
great.
risk screwing it up.
Glad you're happy. Now, so the Squirrel Hill Railroad, 1863, we've taken just as long to fix this, up to the time when they start to build it in 1889. By 1890, or 1890, they've gone bust. They've built some of the right-of-way. They've built this trestle down in Junction Hollow and over the B&O Railroad, and they've gone bust. It's sold at sheriff's sale for under $10,000 to Thomas A. Noble. And he's going to show up in a lot of Pittsburgh street railways, and he charters, under the same steam railway charter, the Shenley Park and Highland Street Railway. Now, it's going to come out, and I'm just kind of showing you this. Notice there's almost nobody living down here, but it'll come up this hill. This is Thomas Bigelow's magnificent entrance into Shenley Park, you know, and it's going to run through here. Look at how very little is up here at that time. Okay, this map I found in an atlas down at the museum. Here is the line crawling up. Here's John Kerr Street. So we're in the CMU property, and it's going to run, I think this building is still there. This is, you notice, Woodlawn. They've changed the name. But there's a hall in here that I noticed is still there. And so this becomes Margaret Morrison. It's going to head off over to here, paralleling Forbes Avenue. Now, they begin building this line, and immediately, and don't forget, Mary Shenley has said, before she gave the land to the park, or for the park, she said, you can run a trolley over this for $1. That's all she did. And so that's before the city gets the park. Edward Bigelow is the city public works director. He hates this trolley line. He tries all the time to get rid of it. And he just can't do it. It even goes to the courts. Up in this area, he's got Booth and Flynn, who seem to do all the work for the city, building a new entrance to Shenley Park, and they tear up the tracks. And that causes the railway to go to court, and Judge Ewing issues an injunction and said, no, you're not going to bother anybody on this railway line that can build. Well, except they're not making a whole lot of money when they start to operate, and that is somewhere before September. You know, we're talking of an injunction in July of 1892, and by September, they're advertising homes on the car line. Okay, so they put track down real fast, but Ewing wants to go to Homestead, because there's a lot of people here, and he needs to make money. He's really not making money on what he's transporting. And to do that, they get ordinances. Let's come down Murray Avenue. We'll build a bridge over what was then Saline Street, and down private right-of-way on what we would have called Old Browns Hill in the 70s, and to get over into Homestead. And I just kind of wanted to show you the detail. Brown's Bridge, SS Brown decides he's going to build a bridge connecting the two towns, and the car barn is built down here, the powerhouse is built down here, and he charges a toll, a monthly toll for the streetcars coming across the bridge. Also, here we are at Hazelwood Avenue, and here's the current Murray Avenue, but look at how the trolley before the avenue just kind of went the shortest way on its own right-of-way. Now, something else is happening on the other side of Homestead. You have the Homestead and Highlands. They're showing up as a street railway in this area. They will build in Homestead in Ravine Street up in West Mifflin. They get their rights. One of the things they have to do in this charter is get into the city of Pittsburgh in 2 years, okay? Or everything's null and void. In the meantime, the Shenley Park and Highlands, they're operating under a steam railway charter. They really can't do a whole lot. They're certainly not allowed to merge with another system. In 1894, both systems start to talk. You know, one needs to get into the city, one wants to get into Homestead. They wind up having directors from both streetcar companies in a sort of agreement. It's not really official, but it's an agreement, and they're going to run each system running their cars all the way up into the city of Pittsburgh. Certainly they're still running through Shenley Park, but the city connection is made at Oakland. Here's a picture of Brown's Bridge. And this was a real rough climb going up, and there's all sorts of newspaper articles about collapses, much like Route 30 today. Typical four-wheel car. This, we think, is shot from Bigelow's Bridge into Shenley Park. You notice it was single track. They passed in certain places. They had a sighting. In 1898, they're going to be able to use the Forbes Avenue Bridge and finally make Mr. Bigelow very happy by getting out of the park. Typical car. Notice it said post office, and some of these cars would carry pouch mail. We think this is just above 4-mile run. If you look at the geography, that's all you can see. Quite a hilly little line. There was always talk of fog down here. Newspapers talk about fog. Here's a good example, 1897, September. There's 25 Italians. They specified that. Back in those days, the papers specified. Italian workmen going off to build the Beechwood Boulevard. And they're running along Woodland Avenue, and the car derailed on one of the many sharp curves and, you know, took off the track. A motorman was hurt, one laborer was hurt. But you got 24 guys to put the car back on. They got another motorman out of the car barn, and they just kept going. But there's tons of accidents on this line. The Monongahela Street Railway, the Mellons, come up with the idea that at some point we want to run a complete line, one single line, from the city of Pittsburgh up and down the Mon Valley. And they eventually expand that to Turtle Creek. They form another line for 999 years. That's a typical open car from that period of time. And this line is chartered for one thing, the number one. And that is, since the Shenley Park line is under a steam railroad charter, we're going to sort of absorb it, and the stock's going to disappear, and the company's going to disappear, and then we've got the track, we've got the right-of-way, you know, and we don't have the handicap of a steam railroad charter. They also actually merge with the Homestead and Highland and the Braddock Homestead and Highland. These are other railroads moving down to Duquesne, building the bridge over the Monongahela River and heading down into Braddock. And they're also going to create a deal at some point with Consolidated Trucks, and yet another of the 194 companies we had, to use their track from Woodland Avenue across the Forbes Bridge to downtown. Here's a simpler version of that. You can see all the way down here. This is Duquesne, and they're going to have to lease eventually trackage from West Penn Railways to get into McKeesport. But here we are. You're going to get trolley service to Wilkinsburg and Braddock on this side, and Swissvale and Rankin, and you're going to get that in 1901 because this is Monongahela number 3. They merge all these systems into the Monongahela Street Railway last 1 week. It is an operating company for 1 week. It's going to be leased to Consolidated Traction on January 1, 1902. Gee, that's the same day Pittsburgh Railways forms, leasing all the different companies that we have into one, which is owned by the Philadelphia Company. It's a big holding company that owns electric companies and coal mining companies and even eventually Equitable Gas. Mellon, in his Monongahela Street Railway, in his lease said, you're going to pay us $315,000 every year. And our company is going to stay alive just so we can collect that. And it stays alive till 1950, till a big reorganization takes place, and they collect $315,000 and taxes every year. And there was Pittsburgh Railways. All these mergers came about really because of the financial panic of 93 and 94. And you merge this street railway together. You can notice all the wonderful equipment you're riding here. And I think the line of cars on Forbes is here because they're tearing down the hump, and that always made a big mess. Sometimes they were profitable, sometimes they weren't. They lost control of the company in 1905. Local control, they had a bankruptcy in 1917. There'll be another one in 1937. And so the profits go up and down. And I want you to call your attention to this guy. Okay? You ever wonder, I always wondered when I came to Pittsburgh, why in the hell is traffic so bad? I mean, nobody can drive, right? Well,
Right.
look at that guy. He's going the wrong way, and he's going to teach his children, and they'll teach their children how to do that. And of course, every time I do a show, many times do these things ever wreck? Oh, really, I get that question. Here's Kennywood, okay? Look how you dressed going to Kennywood. Look how your kids had to dress. You guys were going to ride rides that got you wet. And you ladies that had tons of stuff on must have really enjoyed that. So, but they have a big day out here in 1899, near the 4th of July weekend. Lots of concerts up at Kennywood. And of course, a lot of people stay till the evening concerts. Then they start to leave. And as usual, the last few cars have the most people. In this case, 2 cars left on its own. Here is the bridge, which we now, use, the Murray Avenue Bridge between Greenfield and Squirrel Hill. Well, that's what was there. And right there by the Welfare Farm, there was a spring. And the operators were tacitly allowed to drink at the spring. Get off the car, leave it for a few minutes and have a drink at this spring. It's dark, and the motorman and the conductor, 1013, they're going to get off and have a drink. The lights are on the car. People are packed on the car. And all of a sudden, the lights go out. Probably too many cars coming up Bronze Hill Road, and the power station blew. And they have to set it back. And not uncommon. But what happens? Well, the guy coming up behind him, he's running dark. The guy in front of him is dark. Supposedly, there is a grade that was taken out when they rebuilt Murray Avenue. And, you've got these open cars. One smashed into the other. One telescoped the other. It went between the sides of the car that was stopped. And, miraculously, with all the hurt, there was only one killed. And this is this Norwegian engineer, Ollie Upshin. And the big deal in the paper was he and his son were on a back platform, and he hurled his 9-year-old son off the car moments before he was crushed. And so the Mellons, they take the injured to Homestead. They take the less injured to Murray. This is typically what a load looks like. So anybody complaining about the bus today? We don't allow this. You can see the grade and the track and the bridge, and the spring was in this area. And now Mellon says, you can't drink here anymore. You can't stop and take a break. This is when guys didn't have a break. Who remembers these? Whoever, and I don't want museum members because we run one of these. Anybody remember these old yellow cars? We're all young. Okay, these showed up in 1914. This is typical of what Squirrel Hill would use until about 1950 in addition to the red PCCs. They were 2-man cars, and eventually by 1918 they started to get 1 crewman and no conductor. Murray Avenue, you would think it was very busy, but it wasn't. They still had little 4-man cars until 1921, and they got rid of the 2nd man in 1922. Who remembers these? Oh, okay. All right, now I know. I didn't know you were that old, Deb. What happens in 1929 is a depression. People are buying cars, okay, and then ridership, nobody's riding. Nobody's going anywhere. Half the people aren't working, and so Pittsburgh Railways is reducing their service. At the same time, there's an industry-wide effort to build a brand new streetcar. We're going to forget everything we know about streetcars and build a new one. They experiment for 5 years. They have 2 or 3 prototypes. When the first one shows up, who gets it? We do. July of 1936. That is 1 month before Brooklyn gets their fleet. We have a car. We demonstrate it downtown. We run it around downtown. We take it out to very rich neighborhoods who have automobiles in their backyards. So these people are like Squirrel Hill, like where I live in Mount Lebanon. We had 552-car families in Mount Lebanon in 1931. This car is here's the demonstrator. McKeesport was an affluent place back then. Aspinwall was an affluent place back then. And here's the inside. Oh, so much nicer. Brightly lit, no pipes, no heaters under the car to burn your feet. They're running at Margaret Morrison. If you come down in a few years to the museum, you will ride that car, 1138, which definitely was a Squirrel Hill car. We're going to have that out and ready to go. It's up on blocks now. Does this stuff disappear? No. No, the junk stays. It has to run during the rush hours. The new cars are going to be out in the base service, middle of the day, at night, Saturdays and Sundays. But these things have to keep coming out for the rush hour. And you can see the dates, all in late 1937, that the main Squirrel Hill lines, Forbes Avenue, would have these new cars, and the 60 on Shady would get them 3 years later, when they bought more. Now we're going to take a ride, and now I think this is where you guys are going to want to look. And don't forget, Forbes Avenue was not Forbes Avenue back in the old days. It was Diamond Street. Yeah, well, I don't think any of you guys were around in 1928, were you? You're showing your age.
Yeah, me.
Downtown was big. Look at all the people on the sidewalks.
I was born in 1927.
Certainly there was an awful lot of traffic downtown. There were a lot of wrecks. This is not a cow catcher. It's called a fender. It is to catch you guys, rather roughly, if you decide to walk in front of a streetcar. And don't laugh, there was a film in 1900 or 1902, before the earthquake, took it in San Francisco off the front of a cable car. Unbelievable number of people walking in front of a streetcar. Who remembers National Record?
Yeah.
You know, we came in, later Diamond would be Forbes, but we would still come down. We're really near Market Square at this point in 1963. And we're under the Market House. The Market Square, we go down there, it's a real trendy place now, but back in those days, this was built 1880 or 90 as a market house, one of several in the city. Upstairs, you could roller skate to a live organ. And down here, you see Robert Holy was here at one time. This thing would come down around 1961. In 1959, part of the cornice fell on a lady and crushed her hand, crushed her foot. This gentleman here, Squirrel Hill, 69, which would only go as far as Hazelwood Avenue, and then it would turn around. And I remember this gentleman coming in 75. He begged on the street, but apparently he was far more successful in this picture. And then the second version of Market Square after the Market House was taken down. And you see why we had the new Diamond Market. If anybody wondered, it was Diamond Street and the old market was in the building. So we had the new Diamond Market. We're going to come out Ferry, out Forbes Avenue. And the T runs here today, and there's a big building on this whole thing. And here was a Pennsylvania Railroad yard, and here was the way to get up to the Liberty Bridge and tunnels. And if I turn, this is what I'm going to look. I'm going to go through the caverns up here in Uptown. And here are two cars heading out to Surview, two of the old junkers. Gas stations were starting to show up. There's the entrance, this point, to the Liberty Bridge. Got to show the old stuff. But you remember these. This is the Brady Street Bridge intersection. So I could go to the south side by turning left. Same bridge that poor gentleman had his legs cut off on top. If you guys remember that in the 70s, the bridge shifted when they were taking it down. I'm coming into Oakland. Here's the Boulevard of the Allies. That's the old connection here to the Boulevard of the Allies, and they would extend that later on. We all remember this in Gulf No-Knocks. Yeah, on old buses, charter buses coming out. Remember, Forbes was two-way until the mid-1960s. And look at all the parking lots here in Oakland. You know, Bouquet Street, somewhere in here, and the old Shenley Park in Highlands, going to go down Junction Hollow. The old trolley's going to come up, and you know that was the old trolley line. The new one's going to go straight down, quickly cross the Forbes Avenue Bridge and get to Squirrel Hill. Pretty busy traffic, 1926 or so, but it was very busy here, and a number of pictures were taken here at Atwood Street. That was the Shenley Hotel at one time. It was a hotel for gentlemen at one time. Trolleys came up from South Oakland to my right. And the Iroquois Building's a familiar landmark. And remember, you guys can go to Oakland. There's a lot of shopping. Students go to Oakland, you know. This is how you ride to downtown. The original is a tiny place. And Diana remembers Gustine's.
Yeah.
Right.
This is about the 6900 block. And we're getting close to, no, notice there's no Hillman Library right now. It's a mobile gas. They sold cars there.
That's the
too.
3,900 block.
39.
I thought it was 69. 39.
39.
All right, I stand corrected. I didn't grow up here. Everybody dressed up, students dressed up. You don't have knees sticking out of your jeans. But there's the Shenley Theater. Anybody see movies there?
Where was that?
You're right, 3960. Well, this is now the Hillman Library. This is Bigelow Boulevard, and it's in this block right here. Safety Island, you all remember these, don't you? Blinking light, big heavy concrete. Diana comes from McKeesport, and people were always hitting these. They violated the speed limit, the paper said, and they were drinking. There they are here. Now we're going to come through this area and the library. I have to be very careful. Diana and I are both Penn State graduates, and we had many names for this building, but none of it sounded like Tower of Learning. So I'm going to be very careful. I don't want to bother anybody here. There's the Shenley Hotel, the Shenley Park Hotel. It's a very grainy picture. We don't have the cameras that we had today. We were lucky to get a snapshot. One of our members had worked up in the Tower of Learning. Yeah, thank you. And was able to shoot a number of pictures, including Squirrel Hill. That's why they called it the Highlands. Very hilly ground up there. We crossed the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad on the bridge that Mellon was able to negotiate with the use of the Consolidated Company. There's the Bureau of Mines and the Tower of Learning. Yes, as we start heading out. We're at Beeler Street. There's still a recreational ground here as we start to head out to Squirrel Hill, and there's a PCC here and another streamliner here. About 1940s. Cars are fairly new in this picture.
We have to change Tower of Learning to Cathedral.
Oh, Cathedral. I'm staying corrected. Well,
Sorry.
It looks big.
We went to a cow college. What's he know?
Yeah, I went to Penn State. You're right. Margaret Morrison, this is where the old streetcar line came across. And it's a good shot here to show you these things. And of course, like I said, they were always out during the rush hours. You couldn't get away from it. There were people who waited until a streamliner came by to get on. Some of those red cars were packed. Because they didn't want to ride the old bumpy, noisy, slow cars. For a long time, I did not know where this was. Diana and I rode up and down the street so that I could have somebody looking and I wouldn't hit anybody. We didn't know where it was. We thought we saw a hill, but there's several of those. We couldn't find the bushes. There were stone walls, but certainly not this big. And I was trolling through pictures a couple of days ago. It's okay. And gee whiz, safety island, bushes, hill, and look at those big stones. So I was able to figure it out, and it is down near Margaret Morrison, so pretty good view. I'm sure the trolley operator wants to be where the cars are, in front, blocking them. And now we're actually heading into the Squirrel Hill, and the business district, of course, is bounded by residential sections, both sides. And this is Northumberland, which, as Helen told me, was at one time Homewood Avenue coming into Forbes. It's what I had thought, but wasn't sure. A lot of people took pictures here because it was wide, and this was supposed to be at one time one of the entrances to Shenley Park. It still is now, yeah. But back in the old days, they thought about it sometimes, so that all these houses are still there. So you could actually place this. And I love looking at the old cars as much as I do the streetcars in these pictures. Murdoch. Whiteman Street's about a block away. Here is Murdoch. Murdoch was one of the families that had a huge farm up here. And about 1892 or 3, there was a newspaper article that I found that said, well, he's selling his farm. Okay, so the trolley's here and we're making money now. We're going to make lots. Whiteman Street. And of course, we're only a block away from, we're half a block from here, and only about a block away from the main business district. And somebody's gotten off the car. Somebody went dressed up and went shopping downtown. And we'll turn the other way just to show you what that's like. Now, Pittsburgh Railways really needed money. And anybody could advertise, including the competition. And that's exactly what we have here. This is a dark blue car. It has yellow lettering on it, 1963. And now we're right about where we are. I think over on the left is about where we are, so we can all wave to the streetcar out here. And as it rumbles along, it's going to come up to, who remembers the old wall there? Forbes Terrace, which I think is now Walnut on Forbes. They've totally rebuilt it, and they've taken the wall out. You really can't tell. Had a friend that lived in the back part of that at one time, and I had to ask her, because I knew there was a wall there. But anyway, here we are. Golf station, right? The business district, the safety island. Can you believe you could actually, with the cars we had back then, squeeze between the curb and the safety island? And it was a squeeze. Now this is a junction. We're going to have to kind of go back and forth a little bit because the cars to Keysport, the Homestead, to Greenfield are going to turn here. Other cars are going to keep going straight. Gee, sun drugs. And of course, you're all dressed up. Why do we have a picture of East Liberty? East Liberty one time was the third largest transit destination in the state of Pennsylvania. And we had that because there's a little loop around the block back here, and the Route 60 cars are going to come down. Here's Center Avenue, here's the cars going out Frankstown, and here is the start of Shady Avenue. And the trolley cars are going to, and here of course we have department stores in downtown. There were I think 5 of them. May Stearns was up here. This is at Highland on Penn. And here we are coming across Shady Avenue. It doesn't even look like that today. This is a giant eagle. They've relocated Shady Avenue, certainly much wider. All these buildings gone. But these Shady cars would cross the railroad, and there was a hotel here. I think this is around Aurelia Street, and most of this line to Squirrel Hill is going to be residential. And we're going to pass, I think that's the Clayton House, 5th Avenue. These tracks had to be built after Pittsburgh Railways took over. I'm not sure of the date, but they waited until the street was graded before they put tracks down. Devereux, I think that's how you pronounce it, Devereux? Devereux, okay. I didn't take French. Learn a little Ukrainian at home. None of those words you want to know, but look at that intersection. I'm looking down towards East Liberty from Shady Forbes Terrace, and it looks just like this. Those buildings, at least on the left. No gas stations. The price is right. If you take a look, 28 cents. Wow. Here's a color shot, because I just could not leave this out with that beautiful car there. Price is a penny higher, and people are getting on and off. And again, look how well dressed they are, dressed to the nines, to go out in public. Yeah, oh, Diana wants me to... Superman, I don't believe, is in here, but there's a phone booth. We don't see them anymore either. There's a lot of things. In fact, this is the library today. The Asbury Methodist Church was here on that corner. And I put this in. You can't find too many pictures on Murray Avenue of streetcars. The city absolutely did not want to put them in their construction photos. And a lot of people like me that would come to Pittsburgh to take trolley pictures wanted to go out where the hills and the bridges were. And we would avoid what probably is Sunday Street because this would have been very crowded. I think this is Bartlett, or Darlington, I think. There is, however, a streetcar here that's hurtling along Forbes Avenue trying to get down to the end of the line. And it's 32, so you won't see any streamliners yet. This I got lucky because somebody was here taking a streetcar picture. And it's not very far away from Forbes, but it shows you service here. And it's again a 69 car. It's going to go to Hazelwood Avenue and go Hazelwood, Greenfield, Loretta, come back in. Much of the business on this line ended when you got into the Homestead area. Much like the bus today. There's a car, another old one down here. Just giving you an idea. Now this area has hardly changed. It's approaching Forward Avenue. And I've got the street numbers. I was able to find them, and I think, is that Shar Torah congregation? That is still there. That's hardly changed. except for the automobiles.
Yes.
There's Forward Avenue with everybody waiting for the streetcars. Yeah, where Poli was. Yeah, obviously somebody looks like they want to go to school. And how many of you women today would be caught dead with a dress and white socks? And that was so common. You see that in pictures all the time. It was common. Now, Tom Castrodale, sitting right over there, won this, I think, on eBay, or found this in some little nook. He spends hours on the computer. But we're looking at what they call the angle, which is for forward. And look at the private right-of-way and the lack of development going up from forward. This is going to be the Moorfield. This will be Poli's at one time. But their own tracks were down before Murray Avenue really existed as an actual, it was a paper street. So, you know, now of course we're in much later days and everything is there. And we're going to approach the bridge, which at one time went over to Saline Street. This was a single track bridge with possibly a sidewalk. Some of them had sidewalks on it. I don't think this did. And Beechwood has not been built yet. So it's a very spindly thing. The Port Authority would take over a lot of these things in 1964, and the state didn't want them, and they would have to fix them. We still fix them, and Marty Griffin is always howling on the radio about why is the Port Authority fixing bridges? Well, because we got them, we own them. Not much I can do. Here it is, 1913, 1914, and they will build the new Murray Avenue Bridge, or probably the second one. And we've got a couple of pictures of that. Everybody loved to take pictures of that. We're looking to Greenfield, I believe. If you really want to know the direction you're looking, just go out and look at the billboards because they're still there. The same two on the left and the same three on the right are there. And it makes it so much more easier identifying pictures and going out on 2nd Avenue looking for, I hope the wall is still there because the houses aren't. And that's, look at those automobiles, aren't they cool, you know? And a red, white, and blue mailbox. Gotta remember, you look at all the details in these things, the things that time forgot. And there's the loop, you would have the 69 turning at Loretta, and also the Greenfield car came up, and it would turn in the opposite direction. And the Giant Eagle is over on my left today. And just a little bit past Loretta. And some of those buildings are still there. We verified that. Mm-hmm. Here's the loop. The cars would go left if you're a 69. They would go right if you're a 68 going to Kennywood, Duquesne, Homestead, you know, the Mon Valley. And I got a shot at the other side of the street because I don't think all of that exists anymore. The streets were wonderfully paved, as you can see. Now, here's where that private right-of-way I showed you kind of snuck in. Here's Murray Avenue, and we're going to head down Browns Hill Road and look at what we have. There is no street, and that street's not going to show up till about 1937 when the Homestead High Level Bridge is being built, and Browns Hill Road is also being rebuilt by the county. And here, well, here's just a map. I should have put that there. It's always a misplaced one, but there's that detail of private right-of-way. If you didn't know, here it is, all the way down to what would become Old Browns Hill Road. And I think that's where the house they raised from the railroad was up here, I think. They're tearing it all out for the bridge. And that is considered today a light rail line, traffic free. But not anymore. In fact, it's worse now. But we recognize right where we are, we're near Imogene, I believe. And coming through the wall that was put in there to support the hills so we don't have another Route 30, I hope. Homestead High Level Bridge. And looking down the ramp, they're building the ramp into what was known as the Ward, which would become U.S. Steel, which is now a big recreational place called the Waterfront. Mm-hmm. But back here, there was about 1,100 families, there were churches, there were schools. The old Browns Bridge took the streetcars across the railroads, two of them, over here at Amity. And there's the bridge. Nice view from, that's a county photo. I had a friend that was a bridge engineer once, and we had a chance to look at some of those, and they're pretty cool. Remember, Chiodos would eventually be here, then they're running PCC, so it's the middle of the day. Base services, that's what we call it in the industry.
Waymo?
Whammo. Yeah, hey, yeah, I missed that. Well, you know, to me that wasn't a big deal. I never grew up listening to Whammo. I listened to WEJL. This is Homestead. Look how busy it is. People told me during the war that you walked one way on the side of the street going that way and you walked the other side, and there were so many people on Saturday nights. The typical safety island here. There's the Leona. They had movies. They had lots of stores. I don't think there were any tattoo parlors. And I remember seeing this double feature. It was a Robert Taylor double feature. It was Ivanhoe and Knights of the Round Table, and I thought Ivanhoe was the much better movie. The other one was kind of corny. The last trolley line in Homestead is in 1965. It's the one that heads up Interboro Avenue and Main Street, and then you're going to get to the mill area, and remember the wall. And for as long as that wall was there, there was a sign on it painted that said, "Streetcar, stop." The 60s normally ended at Munhall Loop, and you know, to describe that today would be roughly where, and the loop is still there, but it's roughly where that entrance, that easterly entrance to the waterfront comes out. The 55s went down that way, the 68s. It could have been either one over here. But sometimes in the summer, the 60s were extended to Kennywood. I showed this slide once. It was the 50th anniversary of Kennywood. All these people were coming out. Pittsburgh Railway's taking a lot of photos of this. And at the end of the show, this was old slides back then, some very ancient lady hobbled up from the back and wanted to see this slide. And I figured she couldn't see it. She looked at it. She said, "That's me and my mother." I've never had that happen before, and never happened again. So she saw herself. Plum Alley existed back then. I think the main road's over here now. And the interesting thing about this is that wall was very close to the car. If it rained in any degree, like what we've had the last month, that wall would bend out, and the trolleys had to use both tracks. Or both directions. And then, of course, everybody remembers you got to a mill, there was a bridge, there was an office, you weren't allowed to cross the tracks. And this is Duquesne. None of this exists, obviously, today. And it would wind up in McKeesport. It would turn at Locust and Sinclair, and it would not cross the railroad because they didn't want to be tied up by all the trains that there was always a train going through McKeesport. And I was told a fire engine was on one side and the fire was over here, and the train is there. And I had a chance to scan this. This was the Model Railroad Club in McKeesport, and I scanned it at a very high, super ridiculous resolution. And when I looked at that car, once again, 1138, today at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. So you can see it was generally assigned to the McKeesport line. Now, we're going to come back up here, and we're going to head east. And we're going to see some photos in the business district and a bit beyond. And of course, there's the Asbury Church. And this is without the tracks. The McKeesport line disappears in 1958. In July of 1958, there are no more trolleys on Murray Avenue. The city wants to rebuild the street. That building obviously was probably built in the early 60s or late 50s. And when was that? 60s. Yeah, okay. And we'll just look at some of these, see if you can recognize. Now, I put this in. I know it's the same thing. But how many remember or had one of these panel bands? You've got to put this kind of stuff in because that's part of our collective memories. And that's why we decided to put this one in. There is the Squirrel Hill Cafe. Still there. Sun Drug is not there. The newsstand, I heard.
And the bank.
Yeah.
Right. The bank. A little.
The bank is there. Yeah, this picture does show a lot. And don't forget, Kennywood is that way. Gotta put that up there, always up, right? If I looked, it may still be up. There's PNC, or when it became a PNC, and a whole load of people getting on to go to downtown, most likely. 64 went out to East Pittsburgh. I got a few shots here, but we'll see some stuff in the service stations you don't see anymore. And look at, she's all dressed up there. There's a different phone booth. It's got a cute little roof on it, much nicer than the old one. The next one, you know, who remembers these guys in their uniforms checking your oil and checking your tires? I think that's one, and you know, some really neat old cars. There were 3 gas stations on this corner. 3.
There were about a
There
dozen
are
in
2 of
Squirrel
them.
Hill.
The other one is, I think, is the Starbucks is there now, I believe.
Yeah.
Mary are heading off to East Liberty, but it shows some of the buildings here that had been there. And I found this one on the website. And it shows Rose and Drugs, and here's a car heading, obviously, to Wilkinsburg. The Esso was over there. Now that's a little center now, I guess, of activity here. And again, really, really good streets. The railways thought it was great paving with brick. It was real easy to pull up and it was real easy to put back. It did not involve any asphalt whatsoever. Red was a popular color for automobiles back then and for streetcars. Beechwood, or one part of Beechwood, there's the apartment behind it.
What?
I lived in that house, that corner house.
Seriously?
Oh, did you?
Oh my gosh, how cool.
Oh, that's great. And that house is still there as well.
Right.
That's another, I mean, Beechwood, you know, as you know, kind of weaves all over the place. No rhyme or reason for it. As we head out to Frick Park and we pass the cemeteries, Homewood Cemetery is one of them. There's another one there, can't think of its name. But I do remember Art Ellis, who's 99 this year, and he still drives himself to the Trolley Museum, worked for Pittsburgh Railways beginning in 1946, and he said when these cars came in, they were getting tickets right and left. They were really flying. They had to gear the cars down because some of these were going 50 miles an hour. Cross 9 Mile Run, and now we're essentially in Regent Square. And who remembers the pharmacy, the Junction Pharmacy? Not there anymore. And if I was turning to the left, to the right rather, I'd head to Swissville and Rankin. But I'm going to go straight. I'm going to go to Wilkinsburg, North Braddock. This section of between Forbes and Peebles is right here. Yeah, that's Braddock Avenue. We all think it was a road, but it was actually private right-of-way. Pittsburgh Railways owned it. Once a year, they closed it to all traffic but streetcars. And that allowed them to keep the private right-of-way designation. Otherwise, the city would have stolen it for a road. Wilkinsburg was loaded with various types of houses. Here's one of the old cars on a charter. Not the greatest homes. The railroad cut through it, Pennsylvania Railroad, and all these heavy walls and tunnels were built. This is a one-way street now. So you would go under this in the direction of the streetcar. That building back here was a really neat curved building. It was built on a tight turn. This is typical Wilkinsburg, though, heavy, much heavier buildings, bigger homes, apartment buildings, and you know we'll run through there. Not in the business district. We're about a block and a half away from Penn, and we're going to head down and pass the switch, Union Switch and Signal, a shopping center today. Here's Swissville, and the church is there. The railroad station is not. We're essentially near Braddock Avenue. Who remembers Winkies?
Yeah, we
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I was a Penn State student, that's all I could afford. They tasted exactly the price. The price was, you know, it just wasn't that good. It was like cardboard. But I could afford it. I can get a lot of them for $1. The neighborhoods beyond are Swissvale, North Braddock, parts of Rankin, East Pittsburgh are all working class neighborhoods. I tried to find this spot. I really can't because nothing is here. Absolutely nothing. Not one building is in this area today. And I was able to figure this out by the wall, and you could tell by the hill here in the street, the little hump. But again, so much of this has disappeared. You know, it was kind of tight out there. Roads were narrow, and I wouldn't try passing a streetcar here. That building is still there, and again, very tight though. And where in the heck, you buy a car, and where do you park? Where do you park? I haven't figured that out.
Sidewalk.
As we roll along, Dooker's Hollow Bridge, this bridge was built by the county. It replaced a wooden bridge that was down here, and you could see a part of the streetcar line that's going under and starting to come back up on the next shot. because there's the Westinghouse Bridge, which is not getting much traffic, I suspect, today. Here's where that wooden trestle was, and here's the trolley going into East Pittsburgh, and you can still see that today. If you want to get bitten by a tick, you come down into East Pittsburgh. This is today the Triborough Expressway. None of these businesses are here today, and it's going to come along 2 or 3 blocks along the Westinghouse plant. That's why they built it, to come down here, make one more turn onto Electric and onto, or rather, Linden is right here. It's going to turn here, and it's at the end of the line. And none of that is there today. All those buildings are gone. Here's a car coming up Braddock Avenue. This is what was called Braddock Junction, and that's where the name Junction Pharmacy comes from. And it's all residential, all the way down to the Parkway, all the way down into Swissville. And I think if you look, here, Westinghouse. You can see the Westinghouse sign. And they relocated this line when the Parkway was built. You can see the old line today. The tracks are still there, if you want to look. And it would kind of come up and join over here. Now the tracks are coming under the new Parkway, you know, and it's going to come over that way to get into Swissville. This is all covered by the Parkway. This is 9 Mile Run. Down there was a gas station. This is a Conflict Brewing, and many of these narrow streets had a lot of this because that guy is not reasonably parked. If you're a streetcar operator, you're ringing your bell. You may go out and have a fight with them, or if you call the route foreman, they're going to tow your car. A lot of the old bridges were here. This is Tassie Hollow. This one has been filled in since then. And here's the color shot of the Hillside Dodge. So they were very brightly painted cars. The colored car era actually started in the 1920s in Pittsburgh. And they did a lot of this during the war and after the war. And I guess some of you remember downtown when cars were covered with beer cans and telephones and, you know, whatever you wanted to advertise. My favorite was the Army car. It was a camouflage car. We hit everything out there on the interurban line, the library. Cary Furnace, Mon Valley Mills. There's the dam. Kennywood's on the other side. They're refurbishing along 2nd Avenue. New homes, and here's the old homes back there for East Pittsburgh. You can see the Rankin Bridge, which has replaced the West Braddock Bridge. Yeah, that's what it was like. Had a lot more character than it does today. And some of those ramps have been taken out. They were put in there specifically for streetcar operation. And just to show you why the maps look really weird. On a map, this trolley line and that trolley line look really close together. A lot of experts have come in and wondered about it until you see the height difference. That's the Route 64. Braddock was full of industries. This was an old car barn in Braddock. They were digging in a wall about 10 years ago, found a safe, thought it was a gold mine. And what it was 10 years of records, daily operations records for the Pittsburgh Railways. And they gave it to us. Very nice people. And it would end at the mill. And one time people lived down here, at one time. But since the Parkway came in, everybody thought they could live somewhere else. Okay, we're going to come to an end. I know you guys want to go do something. But after the war is really when we started getting into the end of streetcars, the start of the Port Authority. You know, this was illegal during the war. Although Philadelphia Transit did not know that, and the Army came in to take their system over, we did not strike until after the war. We were in bankruptcy, so we saved a lot of money. We didn't have to pay a lot of things out. And the Guggenheims found this out and bought the stock after the war. Then they went to Philadelphia Company. Philadelphia Company, the owner of Pittsburgh Railways, had been letting them pass by, not pay them the rent they were supposed to get. Instead, they said, buy new streetcars, improve your system. Well, the Guggenheim sued. You know, you're not doing this right. We want our money. And they wound up walking away with all the cash that Pittsburgh Railways had. You know, you had strikes. Of course, people are buying cars, and the fares are going up, and it's just a downward spiral for the railways. You cut the service, fewer people riding. They go buy a car. We had a 2-month strike here. And they're talking about one transit system as early as 1947. We have 32 independent bus companies. The Monongahela Inclined Plane is an independent company. Pittsburgh Railways is an independent company. And so the Port Authority is going to take this over in 1964. The Port Authority started in the 50s to manage the largest inland port in the nation, and that's us. When they decided to get another authority for public transit, a typical Pittsburgh attitude was, we don't want one of them, we don't want the other one. You know? What do? Hey, just let the Port Authority we have take over the bus and trolleys. And so that's why the Port Authority today runs buses and trolleys. It has nothing to do with waterways anymore. And here we are, the typical, the cars were painted in gray and white, the ones that they kept. The lines had already been abandoned and under Pittsburgh Railways, and more lines are going to be abandoned between 64 and 67. And the Squirrel Hill lines that remain to East Pittsburgh, Swissville, Braddock, will be abandoned in early January 1967. And I mentioned the Port Authority inherits all these wonderfully maintained bridges. And would you get away with a sign like this today? Now read the whole thing. Basically says if you're on the wrong part of the bridge and you fall in, too bad, you know. That's what they're saying.
There's no
And
time to read
I
it.
can't tell you what. But by 1971, only South Hills has streetcar lines, not even all of theirs. Here's Wood Street. Remember the Roland's candy with the strawberries, chocolate-covered strawberries? And we get rid of the lines to Carrick and the Hilltop, and that leaves the lines to Library, to Drake, and a line through Beechview. And much of these lines are considered light rail today. They're on private right-of-way. They use the Smithfield Street Bridge to come in, traffic freight. Right? They use the trolley tunnel, which was opened in 1904, traffic free. But we got a better idea, right? Westinghouse, people mover. Today you'd see these at airports. But they wanted to run these, and they had no operator, which irked a lot of people. They were going to put a stop on a trolley line that had a roughly every eighth of a mile you could get on the trolley. No, you're going to get on every mile. We'll have to put big park and ride lots, you know, and they'll be on big concrete structures. So you have towns like Mount Lebanon saying, what? You're going to put that over our street? What do we have to tear down for a 1,000-car parking lot? And, you know, Mayor Flaherty got involved with this, and eventually Governor Schaap withdrew the money for this, you know, and it was unsuccessful. The only time it ran was during the Allegheny County Fair down in South Park. Timoney's really said it all. Because I remember these days, you know. Now that we can't do Skybus, what do? Can we replace it with buses? Can we build a busway? You know, do we do anything with these trolleys? And there's a big debate that goes on. In the meantime, it's not very stable out there. And I remember seeing this car, you know, cheerfully refund your fares if it goes off a bridge. We had several out there. Yeah, I mean, this was not uncommon during the rush hour to see this happen. I remember one that went down off the bank into a creek and the back end was sticking up in the air. In fact, I knew the operator who did that, and it was all bad track, okay? And so you have this, you're comparing the assets with, you know, politicians here are really thinking these things are extinct. Who else has trolley cars? Although I do remember reading about an argument in Harrisburg, and a Philadelphia legislator was talking about the system in Toronto, and another legislator, a very well-knowing person, said, yeah, I've been there, cleanest city in the United States. They build new systems from scratch in the West, and they're very successful. San Diego is one that comes to mind, and so all of a sudden, Pittsburgh gets on the bandwagon, and the trolley does escape from extinction land. We do the light rail line between 84 and 87. We build a line on the Beechview side. There's a big opening parade of cars loaded with politicians, and they have repainted one of the PCCs in what they think is its original color. Not quite right, but reasonable facsimile. Our car is here, 3756, and if you look at that sign, or if you can't see it, proud to be a grandparent. Third generation of streetcars on the light rail line. We skipped one, but that's just a light rail picture. It's easy. No, it's okay, because it'll show, that was the original color, but they're now silver. And we continue putting stuff on the sides of the cars. We do have ads. We don't paint them anymore. They are vinyl wraps. This one advertises 50th anniversary of Pittsburgh Railways. And if you look at that red car underneath it, you're going to see one of the old PCCs that showed up here in Squirrel Hill in 1937, sort of emblazoned atop the regular paint on that car. What do you guys have? Well, you can go downtown and ride the streetcar. You can come to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum and ride cars very similar to what we ran. And I have brochures. There's some here on the table there. There's some back here. I didn't want to put a lot of museum stuff in here simply because of the time factor. Found a lot to say. You guys could ride your bus to the same places like Kennywood and McKeesport that your ancestors did. Or come on down to the Trolley Museum and you could ride all of the cars that originally would have served Squirrel Hill. Okay? I'm open for questions or comments. Otherwise, I'm closed for the day. I'm going for a trolley ride. Thank you so much.
We were in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and all they have are these PCC streetcars all over the place. Are they new or refurbished?
No. Well, first of all, you have to go under the street in San Francisco, go under Market Street. You will see cars, like real cars, like I showed you, for 5 different lines. On the surface, they really like their trolleys, and that's a neat story. They're PCCs, they're like the red trolleys in Pittsburgh. And in fact, what they've done is refurbish them, and they paint them up in the colors of other cities that had them.
These are original,
Where did they
but
come
they're
from? They
not
came
new.
from Philadelphia. Philadelphia refurbished 200 of these in the early 90s, and they were supposed to run for a period of time. And they abandoned the trolley lines that they were supposed to run on. They let them sit in the yard, and then when it came time, 12 years is up, they were good for 12 years, and they were going to start to scrap them. And a nice federal employee showed up and said, hey, you know what? If the wheels aren't turning, the clock ain't ticking. We paid money to restore those cars. So what do? Well, they sold a lot of them to San Francisco. San Francisco was looking for them, and the Fed said that's okay. We paid for them to run. If you don't want to run them, San Francisco also gets federal money. That's fine. Okay. What they did with about 18 or 20 of them, they made a promise in return for some work done on the commuter rail system. They have a huge system, multimodal. The city wanted a streetcar line restored. So they sent 18 cars up to Brookville, Pennsylvania, that restores these things. They got air conditioning on them, something no transit system had been able to do with these old cars. And they are running today past the zoo on Girard Avenue in the city of Philadelphia.
That's right.
When the trolleys stopped running in the East End and most of Pittsburgh and were replaced by buses, why did that not happen in the South Hills?
Probably a couple of reasons. First, you can only you got money from the feds. Back in those days, funding was different. You got money from the feds. They told you how to spend it. Okay, now we can spend it and account for it. But back then, they might have a year when it's for garages. All you can do is build garages. And there were years where you could buy buses, and they would buy the buses. The other thing was they couldn't get enough buses because the Port Authority, remember, had put together all these bus systems. Okay, a lot of them were in worse shape than the streetcars. Some of them had 3 or 4 buses, some of them had 18 or 20, some had 50. No garage facilities for the operators. They were out, urinating in the back of the barn. And a lot of work had to go towards upgrading the bus system. Remember, it's the Port Authority, and your tax money's going in it, okay? They don't want to see the people, the rich Mount Lebanites in South Hills getting streetcars or new buses. We're over here in Braddock, and we're getting nothing, okay? A racial factor starts, and I worked there, so I know. Underneath it all was a racial factor. Some neighborhoods had to get the new buses first. It was just what Harrisburg wanted to see. That's what Washington wanted to see. And then you had the private right-of-way. You had this 3,500-foot trolley tunnel. And it kept you out of the Liberty tunnels. Buses go through the Liberty tunnel. So we got to try to use this if we could. Smithfield Street Bridge. The whole side was was nothing but streetcars, okay? And as you get into the energy crisis, I think that's what ultimately saves it. Because now, all of a sudden, we're looking at light rail vehicles, i.e. trolleys, the T. We're looking at railroads and subways again. I mean, this is big. And so how can we not, how can we don't want to avoid this, this is electricity, my God, So, and there was always some support for trolleys. So the energy crisis probably saves us, it probably saves some other trolley lines that are old city trolley lines that are still running in this country. There are so many new lines, it's unbelievable now.
When was the tunnel built going up to the South Oaks Junction?
Tunnel was built in 1904. Naturally, Booth and Flint built the tunnel under the name South Hills Tunnel Company. So Pittsburgh Railways never really owned the tunnel. Okay, Philadelphia Company did. And at the same time, the line to Beachview was going to open. Yeah.
There were many areas where the tracks are paved over. If the pavement was removed, would the tracks be usable?
No, because what you don't see, well, of course, there's ties. Most of that was laid on wooden ties. What's happened to wooden ties in 60 years? Pretty bad. The other thing is each section of rail has a bond. It has a wire, a big heavy wire, steel bond. So the electricity continues to pass through it. And those bonds are all corroded, rotted away. They would want to put, and of course, the newer streetcars, they're so heavy, those old tracks are so heavy. There's segments of tracks in, there's segments of tracks out, utility companies come in. What's this? Cut it out. Yeah.
They have plans for a bus rapid transit coming from downtown to Oakland. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, you're never going to get streetcars here. Again, I think you got to take a look at, what are they going to sit in? What kind of traffic? And what's garbage day on Forbes Avenue like? Now, I'm looking at the arguments from somebody who's been retired for about 10 years. Okay. So I'm not in there. There were plans for a trolley subway downtown, and one by about 1910 that would start at Wilkinsburg and go all the way to the north side that we used to laugh at. The north side was funny, but it was supposed to end at the north side. And that never occurred because of state politics. Back in those days, everybody would vote for a tax. And Pittsburgh had established a taxing district along the trolley line. East Liberty, Oakland, they were going to pay more because the idea was property's going to go up, we'll have more people, we'll have more business. And can you imagine people in Potter County, it's a tax, I can't vote for a tax. We lost that opportunity down the subway. So our T is sort of rapid transit. It's on private right-of-way. Where do you find that here in East End? East End is totally overbuilt. Buses, but where are they going to put them? I don't know. It works in other cities. I will say that. It works in other cities. But as you read the newspaper, you get to see the conflict. There are people who don't want any change. The last fare increase before I retired, we went through, and I'll explain this one. We went to all the communities and we're having a massive fare increase and service cuts. And we said, what is it you want us to keep? And they actually gave us ideas. We went down to where she lives in McKeesport and we said, well, what do you need? They don't change anything. And if you read the paper today, that's what they're really saying. They just want the way it is. I think they have a lot of kinks to iron out. Are they going to have free transfers? A lot of cities, you get up and you transfer. You don't sit on a bus all the way in. And so I think they're going to have to iron out a lot of kinks. But it works. It will give you faster transit along the heaviest corridor from downtown to Oakland. Yeah.
What were the logistics when there was a problem with a single car?
Wait a minute. I'm going to...
Oh, sorry.
My hearing isn't what it was when I was your age.
When there was a problem with a single car, whether it was electrical or derailed, I mean, some of these places look really isolated. How did they...
Well, you had to wait till it was put back on the tracks. If it broke down, the guy coming up behind him had a bar on his car. It was called a tow bar. And he would hook it up. And then I'm the second guy. I'm going to push that first trolley either there's gonna be a sighting, I can push them off, or I'm gonna have to push them off to the barn, you know. If the power goes out, you do what you do today, you know, you're screwed. You got shuttle, we can put shuttle buses out. And once buses became very effective, after World War II, they weren't the gasoline buses that we had during and before, and they were much bigger. They would put out, if they could, shuttle buses. Now, if you lived up the top of Ravine Street and there was you know, you weren't going anywhere. It's just what it was, and people accepted it back then. You know, I'm stuck until the power goes out or back on.
These pictures are really great. Have you put any of this in a book?
No, they come from a lot of places, and they're certainly not mine. The ones from the museum, we hope someday to publish something. We certainly don't want them out there until people, you know, until everybody gets a chance to. You know, the internet. The problem is putting them in a book or the internet is there's a lot of piracy now.
Oh,
It's
yes.
so much easier than it was with film to take digital images, and people, once they get them, they just send them all over the place. Was a fellow that I knew who's dead now. He lived in Chicago at one point, and he loved photographing the Chicago, Aurora, and Allegheny, one of the three insular urbans. And he moved out here. He worked for the Union Railroad, and he went back to Chicago one day. I asked him for some duplicate photos, and he said, "I don't do that anymore." And I said, "Why?" And he said he went to Chicago to a Central Electric Railfans Association meeting, and somebody was showing his slides. Somebody he had no idea who it was, showing his slides, acting like they were that individual. You know, yeah, and so, and that was back then when you had to send it to Kodak, and it cost money. Now, when people rip it off the internet, University of Pittsburgh stuff, and then they send it on to here, to here, to here, you know. If you want to write a book, you kind of want some of your material to be a secret until, yeah.
Real quick question, do some of the Port Authority bus route numbers today have their origins?
Yeah, isn't that funny? I saw that. For years, remember the Port Authority buses, the 61C, I think you still have. And that used to be they used to have numbers. And when the Port Authority took over, Harold Geisenheimer, guy who hired me, had a great idea. All these roads are coming in like spokes of a wheel. Okay? And we're you know, merging all these different bus companies, and some of them had duplicative numbers. Brentwood had 59, you know, McKeesport had 59. What do? Well, why don't we give each quarter a number? And then all we have to do is assign different bus routes, A, B, C, D. We go all the way up to Z, which is never going to happen. And that was like that for years and years. And I don't think anybody had problems with it until some of these new politicians showed up. Marty Griffin has a problem with anything that's mass transit, because he's the only guy in the world that thinks that a mass transit system could be self-supporting. Now, Bratislava hauls, you know, 300 million people a year, and they need more money. What's going to happen to us? You know, but you know, they got a consultant to come in, and the consultant said, "You know what? People are so damn stupid. They don't understand these numbers." That's what I was there. I was retiring at that point, and you know, somebody took the old Pittsburgh Railways numbers and started assigning them. In some cases to the same routes. So 39 Brookline is, once again, 39 Brookline or 40 Mount Washington. Some of them were different. So you don't have the 8 Perrysville, it's something else. And they replaced, remember the red flyers? The BRs, the CLs, the express buses had a bunch of letters. So they replaced that with the easy thing to understand, the P35, the G2. What's the difference? You know, somebody came up with a numbering system, but they used the Pittsburgh Railways numbers as the base for the new numbers. So there are, and of course some routes disappeared.
Thank you, George.
Anyway, thank you. Thank you very much.
That was a wonderful presentation. The pictures are amazing. One little thing about the website I forgot, we've got some pictures on it now, some nice slideshows. We'll be adding more. Anyone who has pictures that would like to publicize them, give them to us, or share them, and then we'll put them on the website, and then you can have them back. We're going to be working on that the next 12 months. Could you help us move the chairs and tables over there? Please remember to set up for the walking tours.